Okay. So I'm just going to get started so we can stay on time. So welcome everybody to this month's meeting of the Voter Education and Outreach Advisory Committee. Um, and given that we want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about Measure A, instead of doing our usual introducing ourselves on screen, if you could put your name and the organization you're with in the chat, that would be great. And that way we'll have plenty of time for any other questions that come up about the Measure A. So again, I'm Diane Leeds. I'm with San Francisco Peninsula People Power and Yahira. You want to introduce yourself, and then we can see if Jim is ready to go.
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Voter Education Outreach Advisory Committee. Um, I'm Yahya Ortega. I'm here with Thrive Alliance. We have very special guests awaiting to speak to you all on Measure A and all the other topics we are covering today. We might change around this agenda a little bit, but you'll hear from the Elections Division's office. You'll also hear from Margie and David Silverman from the county and the League of Women Voters, and then we'll go into our focus group findings from the last meeting on January 29th. The next VEOAC meeting will be on Wednesday, April 29th, virtual at this moment. So let me take these slides down and we can get started. Jim, are you here? Can you hear us? I've just enabled presentation for other guests. I see Jim, but I can't hear him.
Yeah, he's not on screen yet either.
Okay, in the meantime, let's see who's in the room. We have Susan from the Commission on Status of Women. We have Joanne from Puente, Kefren from the Registrations and Elections Office, Pam, Bellhaven Empowered, Lucy. Hi, Lucy. Tualama for Tongass. Lucy, correct me, please. How do I say
Taulama.
Talama? Talama
Hmm.
for Tongans. And Juliet from the Elections Division as well. Let's see. All right. I see some other folks. I see Marlene, I see Hillary. As we said, introduce yourself in the chat and we're gonna get started very shortly. Kefren, do you know if Jim is able to hear us?
So I don't think Jim is on the call right now. I do know that he is expecting to come to the meeting soon, though. So let's find out where he is.
Okay.
Or we
Well,
can just flip the order and have Jim go after Margie. And
yep. Let's do that so we don't run out of time. We have a lot to cover today. So Margie, are you ready to present? I have enabled presentation for other guests. Let me know if you.
I am ready and I can start sharing when appropriate.
Okay. Well, before you start, Margie, I'd love to tell everyone, or why don't you introduce yourself and let folks know why you're here. And Margie's a longtime VEOC member, and she's um very kindly offered to have a presentation on pros and cons for Measure A, just so that you all in the room can understand it a little better. Let me know if you have any questions. Please put your questions in the chat. We'll have Margie and the other person who's joining us today is Assistant County Attorney David Silverman, who will also be answering some questions. So if you have any questions, write them down, and there will be a portion for your questions next. Kefren, when Jim joins, please let him know that we've switched the order, and he will be after this presentation. Thank you.
Gotcha.
Okay, hi, I'm Margie Gator from the League of Women Voters of North and Central San Mateo County. And as most of you know, the League does ballot proposition pros and cons, usually at the state level, and the state league writes them. But given this is a local measure, we had to write these ourselves. So I'm actually quite happy David's on the call. So he can fact check anything, but I think we did a good job. We have presented this a couple of times and it was well received and really helped people understand this complicated measure. I know we're short on time, so I think most of you know who the League of Women Voters are. We are nonpartisan. We promote active and informed citizen participation at all levels of government through education and advocacy. I'm co-chair of voter service and on the board of our local league. And I think the important thing on this slide is that the league does take, while we're nonpartisan and we don't support or oppose any parties or candidates, we do take positions on measures after study and consensus. And we did that with Measure A, and we have no position on Measure A. What are the pros and cons? We have a standard template for pros and cons, and that's what I'm going to do with Measure A. So we're going to basically go through the league process for pros and cons, and what we cover are the issues, the context around the issues, what the arguments are for the issue and against it, and trying to help you make an informed decision. I have a feeling a lot of you know most of this because we've all been, this group in particular is probably pretty highly involved with Measure A and voting stuff. So, but I do want to talk about useful questions for when you evaluate ballot measures, just generically. You should consider whether the measure is well written and do you understand what it will do? What does it seek to accomplish? Do you understand that? Who are the sponsors, supporters, and opponents of the measure? What is the cost of the measure and how will it be funded? Does the measure deal with an issue that can be easily decided with a yes/no vote? And if the measure amends the county charter, should it belong there, or is there another legal alternative? What does your vote mean? A yes vote means you want to change something or that you favor what is being proposed. And no vote means you want to keep things the way they are or you don't favor this particular change. And I know that seems really basic, but I think it's easy to lose sight of this in all the noise of a campaign, from the various parties. So, if you try to keep it simple, I think it helps you evaluate the ballot measure. So the question of Measure A, and this is a condensed version, it's not the actual text on your ballot. The essential question is, should the county charter be changed to allow the sheriff to be removed from office for cause with a 4 out of 5 vote of county supervisors? So that's the essence of the question. The situation is the county sheriff is an elected position. The current sheriff was elected in 2022, and their term expires at the end of 2028. The supervisors have stated that the sheriff needs to be removed from office to protect the public safety, but it lacks the authority to remove an elected sheriff. A recall by San Mateo County voters would be required to move the sheriff before the end of her term. Voter-initiated recall requires 10% of the signatures of registered voters in San Mateo County, and that's about 46,000 signatures, and they gather them within 160 days. The county attorney estimates that a voter-driven recall would not reach election until at least November of this year or more likely spring of next year. The measure also describes the grounds as cause to remove an elected sheriff. And those are violation of any law related to the performance of the sheriff's duties, flagrant or repeated neglect of a sheriff's duty as defined by law, misappropriation of public funds or property as defined by law, willful falsification of a relevant official statement or document, obstruction of any investigation into the conduct of a sheriff or the San Mateo County Sheriff's Department by a government agency. We should also note that Sheriff Corpus has gone to the courts to try to stop the election, and there is a hearing on next week on February 26th to address this issue. The proposal. Measure A would change the county charter to allow the Board of Supervisors to remove the sheriffs from office if these things happen. The Board of Supervisors must give the sheriff written notice of removal and reasons for the action. The sheriff can reply to those allegations. Then the Board of Supervisors would take a public vote. 4 of the 5 members voting for removal is required to remove the sheriff from office. The amendment would be part of the county charter only until December 31st, 2028, and then it reverts back to what it was. The fiscal costs, when the league analyzes fiscal costs for measures, it's what it would cost if once this measure is implemented. It's the direct cost. So if you make this change, what would it cost taxpayers? And so, for example, if there's a bond measure, what would it cost to pay off that bond? So narrowly, the direct fiscal cost to a county charter change doesn't really cost anything. The charter would change and the Board of Supervisors would operate as usual. Then we'll get into what supporters and opponents say. Measure A, supporters say the allegations against the sheriff are serious and have been sustained by outside review. They include improper hiring, foster an abusive workplace, and racial and homophobic slurs. They also say the county sheriff is an elected position until 2028, and that these allegations are serious enough that they want to try to remove her before earlier than a recall by the voters can be mounted. And yeah, so that's basically the last 2 bullets combined. What opponents say is the county sheriff is an elected official. There is a process for removing elected officials by the voters, and that's a recall. The sheriff has not been charged or prosecuted for any broken laws. And the county supervisors are using a county charter change to get around the role of a voter's recall. Again, this is what supporters say. Measure A, contributions and support. We haven't found, when we put this presentation together, we didn't have any insight on who's been giving money. And then these supporting organizations and opposing organizations are the signatories of the primary argument submission forms that are on the elections website. So you can see here the supporters are Anna Eshue, U.S. Rep. Kevin Mullen, Board Supervisor Noelia Corzo, Sharon Harper of the San Mateo County Organization of Sheriffs Sergeants, Matthew Solano of the San Mateo County Deputy Sheriff's Association, and an opponent who submitted a primary argument form opposing this measure. His name is Dan Stejink, I think is how he says it, Dan Stejink, and he's a Pacifica resident and rescue diver. So that's the overview of the pros and cons. Like I said, I think most of you know a lot of this. There's some useful resources. Obviously, our favorite elections office website. The sample ballot and information pamphlet are there. On our website, we have a page with pros and cons. We have written documents with more analysis and more context to this brief presentation that I've given. So you can go check those out. And that's lwvncsmc.org, and it's Measure A, pros and cons. And you all know where the league is. Whoops. You all know how to vote, I'm pretty sure. Oh, sorry, this is for a presentation we did in Half Moon Bay, so I have the one drop box over here and that we're going to have a vote center, but I'm pretty sure you all know how to vote. And our pitch to join or donate to the league. You all know where we are. And I do have some slides on the questions that have been most frequently asked about what is a county charter and things, but I think I'll open it up and then both I and the assistant county attorney can answer your questions. Yohara, do you want to manage the questions or?
Of course. Let me see if we've gotten any questions here.
I
Just
see a
one
hand
question.
raised.
Yeah, Joanne has her hand raised.
Yes, Joanne, why don't you come off mute? I'm going to remove Margie from the spotlight. Joanne, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so I'm just wondering, the League of Women Voters has said that they have taken a position in the past on other measures. Is there like a specific reason why they didn't take a position on this one in particular?
There's not a specific reason, but in studying it, we couldn't align the measure to various other leagues' position. There were just conflicting principles involved that we just feel like we couldn't come down on one side or the other.
Okay, perfect. And then you guys might have said this at the last meeting, but if you're registered to vote, you will automatically get a ballot for this one?
Yes, you should. If you were registered to vote, you should have gotten a ballot by now mailed to you. And I believe the deadline has already passed. You can still register to vote, but then you would get a non-provisional ballot. And the best bet would be if you are registered to vote, but you did not get a ballot, would be to go to a vote center.
Perfect. And on the website, I can find the nearest vote center in Pescadero. I'm sure on the county's website.
Yes, if you are in Pescadero, I can tell you the nearest will be in Half Moon Bay at the Emergency Operations Center. I live in Half Moon Bay as well.
Okay, so you guys are not going to have anything in well, not you guys, sorry. The county is not going to have anything in Pescadero.
As far as I know, when I looked at the website, I didn't see a vote center in Pescadero,
Okay.
but definitely a drop box. But
Yeah,
check their website to be sure.
Yeah, I think because this is a special election, there's not as many drop boxes and vote centers available for this election.
For sure.
Kefren can give, because I think it has to do with the number of voters or the number of locations per voters is different for a special election. I don't know if Jim's on the line yet. He could probably answer that, or Kefren.
I mean, there's a tool on the Acre website, and I can't speak to this, but I have no personal knowledge, but I plugged in Pescadero to find your closest vote center or ballot drop locations, and it does list a location at the Pescadero Fire Station 59, 1200 Pescadero Creek Road, in Pescadero.
That's a drop box.
That's a
Yeah,
drop
that's a
box.
drop box. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at least so I know, because I know in the past they've opened up the
Like a
boardroom.
4-day or
Yeah, like at the high school in the past. So I just wanted to make sure. So it's just the drop box then.
right. And then one in Half Moon. There will be an 11-day vote center in Half Moon Bay.
Okay, so Hillary actually posted in the chat that it's the same number of outdoor drop boxes. And it's mostly the number of vote centers that has been reduced from, usually we have over 40 to only 15 this time. So I see Donna has her hand raised.
Yes, good morning. My question is, why is the change to the charter only for a certain period of time, and then it goes back to the original provision? What if this happens again? Will there have to be another election the same way, an expensive election? Why couldn't this stay permanent?
That's a very good question, and I think it's for the Board of Supervisors why they've worded it that way, to be honest. David, do you have any insight?
you.
Yeah, that's a really good answer. It was a board decision, and you'd have to refer to anything they said publicly about why they did that. But to answer the second part of your question, yes, in order to extend it or change it, it would require another vote.
Thank you.
Susan?
Hello, everybody. My question is, if she has been doing things that are illegal, I'm wondering why she hasn't been indicted, and maybe that's a question that nobody here can answer.
Pretty
Yeah,
much.
so again, I mean that would be a question for the district attorney. I have no personal knowledge. And before I say anything more, I know I was introduced. My name is David Silverman. I'm the assistant county attorney for the county of San Mateo. And although, I certainly have my own opinions, about the situation, and obviously the board chose to place Measure A on the ballot. I was invited not to provide any opinions today, but simply provide factual information on the law, and that's what I'll do. So please don't interpret anything I say as advocacy. I also trying to intentionally and carefully choose my words so as not to be advocating for or against the measure. So if my answers seem a little robotic, I apologize for that. I do believe that there was some reporting recently that the district attorney was looking at 4 or 5 issues criminally, and that he anticipated being done with those investigations in the coming weeks. But I mean, I think that's all I could say about that. Two very, very quick, very minor, almost insignificant clarifications to the prior comments. One is hyper-technically, the sheriff's current term does not end until the very beginning of 2029,
Right.
not the end of 2028, but it's semantics.
The first Monday after the first Tuesday. Yeah.
Right, right. And then second, there's actually a longer list of supporters of Measure A on the website of Acre. The ones who signed the argument, the rebuttal argument. It's I believe it's Kalima Saludin, Lisa Gaucher, Diane Papin, Eddie Flores, and Jerry Hill.
Yep. Thanks.
Well, I actually have a question that I think people might find interesting. The answer this, I'm directing this to you, Mr. Silberman. If you could explain what the process is, what will happen if Measure A passes? Because I know there's a lot of questions about what happens if it does pass.
Well, that's a multi-parter. So if it passes, and if the board decides to use it to remove the sheriff, the board would first have to develop and approve in a public meeting the procedures that would apply. And I think that this has sometimes been overlooked because it's a little bit farther down in the charter amendment. But the charter amendment, if approved by the voters, would specifically give the Board of Supervisors the authority to develop those procedures for a removal proceeding. So they would need to develop those procedures. They would then have to approve, I'm going to loosely call it charges. They would then need to give the sheriff an opportunity to be heard on those charges. It would need to vote. And I think we fully anticipate, although the sheriff hasn't so indicated, that she would probably file one or more court challenges to anything that the board did.
So again, I think there's also information in terms of, again, I'm thinking about what you presented last night, David, but in terms of what has to, the time period for either calling another, in terms of how to replace the sheriff. If Measure A passes, the board decides yes to remove the sheriff, what happens in terms of filling that vacancy?
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So if the measure were to pass, if the board were to decide to use it, and if the sheriff was actually removed, what would happen next is also governed by the charter. And I was told I didn't have enough time to talk about the difference of a charter county and a general law county, so I won't do it. But I had observed that the county already has a charter. It's one of 14 charter counties. It's its constitution. And it already covers what happens when an elected official like the sheriff is no longer in office. And that could be, due to a removal. It could be, a death. It could be a resignation, it could be anything. That already exists. That is not affected by Measure A, and it determines what happens next. So if a vacancy occurs in an elected office other than that of the Board of Supervisors, because there's a different rule in the charter for what happens with the Board of Supervisors, the board then has a 30-day window to make a binary decision. It can either make an appointment of another sheriff, of a replacement sheriff. And if it does that, that person, unless that person, were to themselves resign or something along those lines was determined, would serve until the end of the term of the existing elected official. So if someone was appointed and they didn't otherwise, resign, they would serve until the very, very beginning of 2029. And there would be an election in 2028, and someone would run and win, and that person would replace the appointee at the very, very beginning of 2029. Alternatively, the board can call an election. And if they do that, the election must be held in not less than 102 days and not more than 131 days from the order calling the election, except that it may be held on a regularly scheduled election day established by the general law if that date falls within 270 days from the order calling the election. So it's appointment or election, and the board has 30 days to make that decision. If it doesn't make the decision within 30 days, then the county officer responsible needs to order the special election. So it's election or appointment.
And the undersheriff serves until a new sheriff is appointed or elected, a new interim, right?
So I know that I know that information has been provided on a number of different sources. I think what I would say about that is that at a minimum, under the chain of command, the sheriff's own rules for what happens when the sheriff is unavailable, that the undersheriff, or if the undersheriff, not the undersheriff, the assistant sheriff, and if not the assistant sheriff, the captain would be responsible for filling in that responsibility. So I mean, I can say that what would actually happen if the sheriff were to be removed, I mean, is
Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, I'll since I've got the, the floor. So another question that I know has come up a lot is, what are the other options besides Measure A? There's a lot of talk about, well, why aren't we just doing a recall election? But I'm a little confused whether there are other options besides Measure A and a recall election for removing an elected official.
So yes, there are other options, although I want to choose my words carefully because the people who are responsible are different. So Measure A is the only method by which the Board of Supervisors could remove a sheriff. There is the recall process, and I think that that's been covered already. The recall process is a voter-driven process. It requires collection of signatures, and I think, as has been noted, and I think the board has stated, I'm not, again, expressing my own opinion, is that is that it likely, if someone were to pursue a recall, the most likely earliest that it would go on the ballot would be in April of 2026, with a small possibility that it could be qualified by November of 2025. The other option for removing an elected official from office is the grand jury process. And again, that the grand jury is an independent body. It is governed by the penal code and the government code. The government code lays out, actually, for the legislature pretty clearly, the process for removing an elected official through the grand jury process. It's covered in sections 360 through 375 of the California Government Code. And each one of those sections, 360 through 3075, covers, one step. But if I were to break it down into, 6 steps, it would be the grand jurors, 12 grand jurors have to vote to issue an accusation. And I would note in San Mateo County, the grand jury consists of 19 members, so 12 of the 19 have to vote to issue what's called an accusation. And just stepping aside, don't mean to make light of anything, but the grand jury is recruiting right now for members, and we need members of the public to volunteer. So, people are encouraged to go on the court website and apply to be a grand juror. So before that happens, the grand jurors need to be presented confidentially evidence to support an accusation. But if they are presented that evidence and they issue an accusation, they need to basically, it's a charging document. They need to state the offense alleged. The accusation, once it's issued, is delivered to the district attorney. The district attorney then serves a copy on the elected official. If the elected official denies the accusation, it goes to a jury trial that's conducted very similar, well, basically identically to the way a criminal indictment is tried to a jury. And then if the jury convicts, the official is removed from office. It is a very rarely utilized procedure. The most recent example that I think many of us are aware of was in Santa Clara. And I don't have personal knowledge, but I did follow it as best I could. And as I understand it, the grand jury was started its work in the fall of a year, and was presented evidence over a series of months. It issued an accusation, and a trial was held the following fall, so approximately a year plus later. And ultimately, the jury determined that the charge was true after the sheriff resigned. So that was the most recent example of that.
And that process wouldn't be able to start presumably until this grand jury is recruited and seated? If that
is not accurate.
Okay.
Not intent. I'm sorry. That sounded harsh.
I'm okay to be wrong.
No. The theoretically, this grand jury could take it up. Again, speaking to what happened in Santa Clara, the district attorney, or a district attorney presented the case to the grand jury for it to issue the accusation, in addition to presenting the case to a subsequent jury when the sheriff contested. And so there's no reason that the current DA could not utilize the existing grand jury, or convene a separate grand jury, separate from the normal recruitment, or utilize an incoming grand jury. There, any of those things are legally possible.
Thank you so much for all that information, Mr. Silberman. So, Margie, you had mentioned that you had some slides with other questions that have come up. Are there any that you think would be valuable for us to hear?
Well, one of them was the process to replace the sheriff. The other was how long does it take to do a voter recall? And in that case, that's not trivial either. So a recall committee needs to be formed. They draft a notice of intention and serve it to the official and file it with the elections office. Then there's a response period. The person who is served has a response period. Then the recall petition is drafted and circulated after elections office approval. And signature collection is a 160-day period. Anybody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Then the actual elections office needs to verify those signatures. I don't know what the time period is on that. And then the election, once it's certified, needs to be scheduled. And typically that's 88 to 125 days from the certification date. So, it's many, many days and months for a recall. And actually, David, my question about that is a recall committee, do they fund their work? Like, is that how a recall committee is funded? I know the elections office would pay for the elections, and that would be our money. But a recall committee, do they need to be self-funded?
So I think I can answer that question indirectly. County money cannot be used to fund a recall election. So I'll phrase it that way. My understanding is that yes, when a recall is done, the recall committee raises money to fund the campaign.
It's mine too, so thanks for confirming. And then the only other question was about county charters, Diane, which David alluded to as there's 14 states out of 58 have county charters, and it's like their own little constitution, gives them a little more home rule. Mm-hmm. And the board wouldn't be able to do this if we didn't have a county charter.
Right. Well, thank you, Margie, for your presentation and all the information. And again, thanks again, Mr. Silberman. So Yahira, I think we're ready to get back into our agenda. And Jim, if you're prepared and ready to go, we'd like to turn the meeting over to you just to give us an update on how the election is going from a process standpoint. If you've any return figures or anything that you think would be important for us to know, we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, and good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I'm a little under the weather, but I'm here today, and I just wanted to, again, wish everybody a great day here. A lot going on with respect to the elections. Just a point of clarification, the elections office does not pay for a recall election. We will process the signatures, and then once we have the signatures processed and it's presented to the governing board where the recall is going to occur, then those costs are incurred by the governing board or the agency for which the recall is being held. So the elections office doesn't pick up the cost. It's basically a reimbursable election to the jurisdiction for which the recall is being held. So it's a process that's initiated, and then once the sufficient signatures are there and a resolution is passed by the governing board, E-88, then those costs start getting billed directly to the actual jurisdiction. But in terms of how this election is coming along, there's a lot of activity. We sent out 445,000 registered voters received ballots in the mail. So people are voting right now, as you well know. There's a total of 15 vote centers that are open throughout the county. All of those are on our website, and you can take a look at that. We have 48 ballot drop boxes that are open now. To date, as of yesterday's reporting, we have 50,803 voters that have voted in this election, which for a special election is a good turnout at this juncture, at this point in time. That's approximately 11.4% As in any election, there are ballots that aren't signed and, have issues. So we have about 267 ballots at this juncture that are challenged because of no signature for the most part or some missing information. They are in the process now of being notified to cure their ballots. So that's a process that goes all the way up through 2 days before the end of the certification of the election. We basically have, at this point in time, a pretty good, as I mentioned, a pretty good turnout. We have exactly how many employees? We have about 50, I believe, that are on board right now that are working, and in vote by mail and in various other operations that we've got going on in the elections office. So that's a general overview. For a special election, there is a very good turnout at this juncture. Special elections generally don't see large voter turnouts. They could be in the neighborhood of, as low as 15% and as high as maybe 50% or 60%. So we'll see where we fall in there. But at this point in time, 11.4% voter turnout is good. I will also have Kefren and Ken here to talk a little bit about some of their voter education and outreach efforts. But before I turn it over to them, I'll answer any questions that you folks might have.
I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I guess you can turn it over to Kenneth and Kefren.
Yeah, Ken and Kefren, I'll just turn it over to you just to give a few highlights on our voter education and education outreach activities, and also any social media items that you might want to cover. So turn it over to you, Ken.
Okay, so close of registration was yesterday. We put out a tweet about that. You can still come into a vote center and register and vote same day. There will be another tweet about that today. We do have one notification that's going to go out closer to the actual day of the election. That's about the Foster City Community Center, which was listed as a vote center in the sample ballot and voter information pamphlet. Unfortunately, their elevator broke down, so that's causing an accessibility issue. So we're going to switch to the Foster City Emergency Operations Center instead. That's been updated on all of our materials. We'll be posting some social media movements about that. We have 2 vote centers currently open. These are the 30-day vote centers. There's one here at 40 Tower Road and one at 555 County Center. And 6 more will be opening this Saturday. They're open 9 to 5 every day, weekends included. The remaining 7 will open on March 4th, Election Day. And for more information, we've got smcvote.gov. It's got a full list of drop boxes and vote centers up and live. And then for more outreach type things, I'll give it over to Kefren.
Yep, and so for kind of our direct outreach, how we letting people know about the election or letting them know about our voter registration support we can provide. For this previous month, I've pretty much been just working with nonprofits, San Mateo and South San Francisco Library as well during Black History Month to supply their larger events with some voter registration materials for February. And so I've been reaching out and working with the libraries. So for February, we obviously have Black History. For March, we're going to have Women's History as well. So just working with these local, either nonprofits or local institutions to make sure they have registration materials and also their larger events, especially if they focus on something like, suffrage movements, or they focus on something like voting rights. Make sure that, we're there front facing. People can register while they're at an event, something like that. So trying to see where we can fit in, let people know about the election that we're going to have in March, but then also let them know that they can register in person and also learn a little bit more as well. And if anybody has anything in this room that you'd like the elections office to be a part of or get involved in, or even if you'd like supplies from us, you're always able to reach out to us. And that's at that outreach email. I can put that in the chat. Thank you.
Any questions for Jim, Kefren, or Ken? Anybody need any additional material? I guess there's not a lot of specific materials for this election other than the postcards.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, thank you all. Thank you, Jim, for coming and presenting, even though, as you said, you're not looking your usual chipper self. So appreciate you making the time.
Thank you.
So Yahira,
Yes, of course.
you want?
Of course. Hi, thank you, Jim, and thank you, David. Thank you, Margie, for all your presentations. Thank you for everyone that has been asking questions. We hope that this was the information you need to relay back to your communities. The next portion of the meeting, we'll be talking a little bit about what we found on January 29th. Diane and I led a small focus group. So we're transitioning now from Measure A to all things VEOAC and the future of VEOAC, or spaces like VEOAC. So it's not necessarily tied to VEOAC, but we did collect some feedback from some folks who were on the line on the 29th. And before I jump into that, let me see if I can share my screen. You let me know if you can see it. So on the 29th, we convened small groups of folks who are community-based organizations, and they gave us some feedback on some things that they would like us to continue as Thrive and SF People Power in combination with the county elections. And so what was reported at that meeting, we had about 15 nonprofit organizations, and we led an activity, and we were able to just collect the feedback and hear from the folks directly who have been attending VEOAC for a couple of years, a couple of months, and even folks that just joined recently. And they were able to express some of their concerns and their wishes for the future of similar meetings and spaces like this. As you know, VEOAC has been around for quite a while, and along with VEOAC, we host at Thrive like our voter engagement brainstorm and other related activities and events that continue to engage the public. So we did a stop, start, continue portion of the meeting activity, and some things that people wanted us to know is they wanted us to improve our consistency in meetings and communications. So that is very clear. We're trying to post when the next meeting will be. And actually, there was an error in the last slide about when the next meeting is. For VEOAC specifically, the next VEOAC meeting will be on April 23rd. So I wanted to correct that before there's any confusion. And of course, you all will receive a follow-up with all the information that was covered here and the ability to register for the next meeting. They want us to continue to start monthly meetings and invite the elections office as needed. As you can see, VEOAC Spaces, the elections office is always kind enough to come and present, give us updates on what's going on with their office, and give us updates on how we can be helpful to them. They want us to continue more meetings and trainings throughout the VEOAC experience. We've integrated our voter engagement brainstorm sessions, and at those sessions, we've led social media content creation trainings. And I will, after this is done, I want all of us to have a conversation about what else you might be looking forward to. What other trainings could we provide that would be helpful for when you do elections? And like, how can we prepare for the next election? The whole point of this is that you all are ready in a good place, are in communication with each other, are collaborating, are continuing the discussion of elections, even on non-election years, right? They want us to continue to develop community forums for civic education in multiple languages. They would like us to establish subcommittees. Like, one idea was to figure out when elections are around, is there a scorecard tracking method for different different initiatives or different representatives running for office. So that was just an idea. They would want us to engage more stakeholders like school districts, local affinity groups, civic educators. That is the whole goal of having a space like this. Our space is very unique. We invite everyone and anyone who would like to join, and we have been very, very happy with the results of having multiple diverse thoughts and presence at this meeting. They want us to continue to advocate for county funded city-led civic engagement programs. So one of the points of feedback that we heard was that they want the county to partner more with the cities and have more involvement. So I guess it just takes some brainstorm to figure out how we can make those connections, how we can have the cities. One good piece of feedback, this is for Jim's office actually, is that the county does such a great job on a county level that they would want the city to replicate some of the practices that you all have at the county level for their own specific election. So I think that that means you're doing a good job, and it means that you're engaging folks as needed. So that was one point of feedback for you all. They want us to continue to provide translated election materials, voter toolkits in more than 5 languages. So, so at Thrive, we have sticked with some of the languages that the county does, but they want us to expand our ability to do multiple languages based on the populations. So I think that's a point of feedback for both of us, right? The Thrive toolkits and the county toolkits. They want to hold group meetings without elections office when appropriate. I think, and that's relevant when we're doing our voter engagement brainstorm with community organizations or just talking to each other, doing some brainstorm. They want us to continue to maintain partnership with schools and community organizations and keep a shared calendar for tracking events. As you all know, Thrive created a shared calendar online where you put in the events as things are coming up, and we can continue to do that on a non-election year to see how you're engaging folks, and then during election year, make it known that these are the ways that you're also engaging folks. And then continue elections office updates during election seasons. So this is a reminder to your office at the elections division that folks really need those updates and are appreciative for you coming to these meetings and giving us and reporting on what you see on your side, on your end of the things. So those are some findings. As I said, we have a bit of time. We have, let me see. We actually have quite a lot of time, but we don't need to use it all. For the last portion of it, for the folks that are in the room, I'd love to hear, Diane and I are thinking like, what other trainings can we weave in the VEOAC schedule? So if we have VEOAC every other month, like the next VEOAC will be in April, we're thinking about what kind of trainings would be helpful in this space for you all to continue the work and learn about what are I want to learn about what are the skills you want to develop within your own capacity to do elections 10 times better than we've done it before. So another idea is to continue to do social media trainings because there's just so many platforms coming up. There's so many ways to do reels and TikToks. So like that's an idea that's on our back of our head. But is there anything else that you all would think that would be helpful for us to implement during our voter engagement brainstorms?
For me, I think it's also helpful if like somebody has some really good practices for their tabling method that work really well because I feel like we're doing social media, but we're also doing tabling. And I feel like that's where I get my best ideas when somebody else shares what's working. And also specific ideas that you're doing. A lot of us educate our staff where we work, and also if there's any specific ideas on best practices for sharing some of the things we hear here, and like um, having a way to have a concise message to share where I don't have an hour to share with my team, but like 10 minutes, like a 10-minute presentation of everything we discuss.
Hmm. I hear that. Yeah, most of us are probably running from meeting to meeting and would like to report out. So what are the easy things that you can take away? And you know, we will brainstorm around that. Like is it providing the follow-up quicker or like figuring out when you need the resources so we can get that to you before we move on. I see another hand. Thank you, Joanne. I see another hand. Lucy.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody for sharing and for the just educating me even further. Um, I One of the challenge or biggest challenge that I have with the community that I serve, which is the Pacific Islander community, is the engagement part, right? Like and do because life is life and it gets busy and priorities are, tend to for our community, it tends to be more focused on like getting basic needs met and but um conveying to the community that yes, that is true. Basic needs being met is very high, like important. However, so are these elections, and they have an impact on getting can have a huge impact on getting those basic needs met. And so I'm wondering if there's like training around because I know we won't take a position on things, but just to educate the community on engagement and why it's important and I get the same like, oh, my vote doesn't count, but it's like trying to get them to understand that it does count, maybe not at maybe like the federal, like it's too big, but like at local level, and doing that without making a choosing a position, but that education, because I'm trying to figure out how to do that. If there's already one, I'm sure there is, but making it more culturally informed so that way it appeals more to the community because uh, a lot of the outreach tends to talk, it like speaks to them but over their heads, and then they don't pay attention or they don't engage. So I'm trying to do a different thing, different from what it's been for the last however many years.
Hmm. I have that jotted down. I love that. Thank you, Lucy. I have culturally informed resources and maybe training on engagement. And maybe we can hear from folks who have been doing that for a while. Because another big part of the feedback that wasn't on the slide is that the folks wanted to hear about who's in the room and what kind of best practices they have with each other. And I think both you and Joanne spoke to the crowdsourcing, like figuring out what skills we have within this room that Diane and I can shine light on every so often. So you all know, okay, I know that for culturally informed best practice, I'm going to go to Lucy because she's doing that within her own organization. So I appreciate that a lot. Okay, so we're going to move on to Kefren.
Yeah, so I just wanted to speak to some of the best practices that I found personally. I feel like when I'm doing a lot of tabling, what can be really successful is if whenever who I'm working with, like let's say if I'm going to outreach at a high school, that I have high schoolers table with me or tabling themselves, or let's say I'm going to a library, the librarians incorporated in that somewhere, where when people go into these places that they visit a lot, if they see somebody who they already know, it makes I feel like outreach a lot more easy for them to take hold on. So like when students see other people who are in their class doing the outreach work, like as long as I'm just able to provide them that little basic part of like, here's how to start doing outreach for the office, or here's what to say and what not to say, then I feel like that can be really helpful for them. Because when people see that, like that's my classmate, it's much easier for them to approach the tables.
Mm. So get someone within the own community to buy into the process. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Kefren. Donna?
Yes, what came to my mind was engagement with people that have mental illness but are high functioning, how to outreach to organizations that support them. And a lot of times, those individuals don't take time to read all of the ballot measures and things like that, but how do we get to those individuals who can vote and will vote? I worked, with the organization, a nonprofit, for 23 years, and I always had a, a a workshop kind of thing for them to ask questions, and I would walk through the different measures. They felt more informed, and then they were able to go and fill out their ballots and be a part of it. And it made them feel so good. Some was the first time. So in that area, I think it's important. Do we go to organizations that service folks like this and do things with them so that their vote counts too?
Yeah. So more outreach for very specific populations. It would be nice to have some folks from organizations that do represent some of those folks to join our meetings. I'm not sure if we have any at the moment. So thank you, Donna, for the reminder.
You're welcome. And I'm one of those too. So I certainly would, like Catherine said, maybe have an individual who's in that population that's at at the table that can share their experience.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, based on the feedback that we heard on the 29th and based on some of the things that you all are saying, Diane and I will get together and figure out what kind of trainings we can provide to kind of weave in into the VEOAC schedule and figure out what nonprofits need to be highlighted and what other best practices may be good for us to share. But that seems like all we have for this meeting. Our speakers were wonderfully on time and having all their information together, and it sounds like like you all have the information you need to do some of this engagement for this last election. We're at the very last end of this election, so if Margie or Jim or Diane don't have anything else to add, I am happy to adjourn this meeting a little early, give you all back time for your life and work. Anything to add, Margie? You came on camera. Nope. Jim, anything from you before we wrap up?
Just everybody have a great day, and thanks for everything that you do. It is extremely valuable. It really is essential in terms of voter engagement and inclusive democracy. This is inclusive democracy at work. So thank you all very much for all of the efforts that you put forth on behalf of our church and myself. It's greatly appreciated, and everybody at the elections office.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Kenneth, Kefren, and Hillary, who were on this call. All right, we'll see you all very shortly, and I'll keep you posted at the next meeting. The next VEOAC is on April 23rd. And make sure to mark your calendars, and we'll send you registration for the next available training. See you all very soon.
And make sure you
Thank
vote.
you, Ira.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.